Corruption is a cancer that eats away at a citizen's faith in democracy, diminishes the instinct for innovation and creativity. Joe Biden. People's indifference is the best breeding ground for corruption to grow. Delia Ferreira, Chair of Transparency International. Corruption is paid by the poor. Pope Francis. Welcome, everyone, to this session on addressing corruption to support and attain the SDGs. My name is Giulia Sergi, and I am Program Manager for Ashoka Europe. I feel very, very privileged to be here with you today and moderating this session where you will hear in the first part of the session the stories of the Ashoka community around the world, Ashoka Fellows and other stakeholders in the field of fighting corruption. And you will be inspired by their amazing work. In the second part, we will discuss together how we can take collective action against this burning problem, starting from the work that Ashoka and its community has already been doing. We want to hear from you, so please keep the chat live. And my colleague, Michaela Fenech, who I welcome in this panel as well, will harvest the questions and comments for us. I believe corruption and organized crime are among the top, if not number one, critical systemic issue that our societies are facing globally. If you look at any social problem you're working to solve in the field of quality education, health services for all, equity and access to services, even the environmental crisis in all of its forms. And if you dig deeper in the root causes creating these social problems, you will find the footprint of a corrupted system, or you will encounter it at some point as a key barrier to achieving your systemic change. If we take this from an SDGs perspective, the United Nations have actually declared that corruption is one of the biggest impediments to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. All of them, all of the goals. Some panelists from a session that was held yesterday that maybe some of you joined summarized this in a way that I think is very powerful. They said that corruption is present everywhere in our lives, hindering the trust in institutions and ultimately the trust in others. It erodes the very essence of democracy and healthy societies. It really, really affects all of us. I believe we can't close our eyes and pretend it's not our concern as citizens, as business leaders, as social entrepreneurs, as politicians and decision makers, as parents, as teachers, and that we are not often even creating the ground for these corrupted systems to flourish. We need to understand that sometimes we are. This is why we have invited here today to speak about all these 5 powerful change makers and social entrepreneurs from the Ashoka community. They come from different parts of the world and work in the field, taking the problem from different perspectives. I am really thrilled to introduce them to you. They are leaders in their field, both for their work at grassroots innovations and with achieving great policy changes. I'm personally constantly inspired by their work, and I am very, very honored to welcome here with us today Flaviano Bianchini, founder and director of Source International and Ashoka Fellow, Greta Rios, president of Olin Jóvenes en Movimiento, Ashoka Fellow as well from Mexico, Paul Radu, Executive Director of the OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, an Ashoka Fellow, Andrea Moriche, former Community Development Manager at Mafia 9 Duncan in Germany, and Federico Angele, Director of the Good Lobby in Italy. Welcome everyone, welcome to our audience. Please use the chat and let's begin with our questions. So Andrea, I would like to start with you. We often think that corruption is mostly a problem of the global south or of some Mediterranean countries in Europe. Even in Italy, where I come from, we think that organized crime and corruption are a problem from the south, that the north is free from them. In reality, we have learned even back in the early 90s with the first magistrates working on the issue that corruption and criminal organizations really follow the money. An Ashoka fellow, John Christensen, actually even mentioned this in his session yesterday. So real corruption happens where business and finance interests are. Andrea, you are from Germany, and you have collaborated for a long time with different organizations working on the fight against corruption and crime. I would like to ask you, is a country like Germany, that is often perceived as one of the healthiest in Europe, are these sorts of countries really safe from corruption and crime?
Yeah, thank you, Julia, for this question. No, they are not. And actually, the stereotype you just mentioned is part of the problem. To think that in Germany there's no corruption and there's no organized crime is part of the problem that makes it so hard to fight against this presence of corruption and organized crime. Because not only the German authorities are thinking that there is no organized crime dealing with corruption, but they also the people are thinking the same stuff. So if you ask a German, what is mafia? What do you associate with mafia? They just think about the Godfather, about blood and shooting around and stuff, a problem between Italians that live in Germany. And they have this folkloristic image of the mafia as they know it from cinema and from books maybe. And if you ask them, what is drangheta? Maybe the answer, it's a sausage to eat. And you have to say, no, this wasn't Duya. It's not drangheta. Drangheta is the most powerful mafia organization. And actually, the reality is very different from the perception, because in Germany, officially, there are registered almost 600 people from our Italian organized crime. Most of them are from drangheta. And we know from Italian prosecutors that unofficially there are probably living more than 5,000 people from the Italian mafia organizations in Germany. What do? They wash money. So all the business they do around the world, and drangheta, for example, is responsible for 90% of cocaine traffic in Europe. So all the money they make, they can spend this money, of course, only if it's washed, if it's clean. So what do? They come to Germany, to the washing machine Germany, to wash this money. And why in Germany? Because in Germany, until 3 years ago, it was very, very easy, and it's still too easy to do so. Because imagine, you can just walk in with with 1 million in cash, walk into a real estate agency, buy an apartment with 1 million cash in your pocket, and nobody cares about that. So until 2017, this was perfectly legal. Now we have a bit better law, and my organization was lobbying successfully for that at least you have to register this transaction in cash in a transparency register. The only problem is no one controls. So it's very easy to corrupt the real estate agent, to corrupt the notary or whomever, pay them a bit like 25,000 euros, and they will just not register this transaction. So unfortunately, money laundering is the main business of organized crime in Germany. And it's very important for the well-functioning of all these organizations. And of course, there's also classical organized crime business that needs corruption. So, for example, the classical vet, I don't know if you know this, it's called the vet carousel, or also exercising power on restaurants and stuff like this. So it is present in Germany, but the big problem is the lack of awareness. There was in 2007 a shooting between criminal organizations, and then the authorities woke up for, let's say, 2 or 3 years and did more cooperation with Italian authorities, but then they fall asleep again. So when there's no awareness amongst authorities, and there's no awareness about society for organizations like Transparency International or my organization, Mafia 9 Danke, it's really hard to raise awareness and to do advocacy. And so what we as Mafia 9 Danke do, we are a small organization, and we try to raise awareness. We participate in creating data, we do interviews, and we do lobby work. So this is the only thing we have to offer. And we are successful a bit in advocacy, so laws have been improving. But the real problem is the missing awareness about the fact that organized crime is spreading, as you said, as a cancer in Germany. Of course, working with corruption, because you need corruption, you need to corrupt police officers, you need to corrupt real estate agents, notaries, and others to do your job here.
Thank you, Andrea. So what we are already starting to touch upon is the fact that this really affects every business that we might encounter, even in our everyday life. And I'm noting down a few things because I'm sure that we'll come back later with our other panelists about the lack of cooperation among authorities from different countries. You mentioned the example of Germany and Italy, and obviously you mentioned citizens' awareness. Yeah. So I would like now to move to our second panelist, Flaviano, to dig a bit deeper into the business perspective, and also moving towards a more global perspective. Flaviano, you are an Ashoka Fellow selected for your impressive work to hold big multinational businesses accountable for their criminal behaviors and their corrupted behaviors. Can you tell us more about the responsibility of business, even very concretely? We all think we know that some businesses are corrupted, but I think it actually goes much beyond what we know and perceive, right? And obviously, please share with you your work, the work we do as an example of a solution, the work with your organization, Source International. Flaviano, over to you.
Well, yes. When we speak about corruption, we think about organized crime, mafia, government, and we always forget one part of the equation, which is corporation. Big corporations are nowadays a huge actor, a huge player all over the world. And it's a global issue. And if we put all together the 100 biggest economy in the world, 51 are corporations and only 49 are states. And it going bigger and bigger and bigger. And corporations, especially, global corporation, global multinational corporations, they use corruption and they use all sorts of systems to do their business. If we think of those corporations, the vast majority of those corporations have lots of different, what is called Chinese box or black box. So companies that are a satellite of another company, which is satellite of another company, which is owned by a trust, which is registered in the British Virgin Islands, and then everything disappears. And obviously, those companies use corruption also to getting the license. If we think about extractive companies, for example, extractive corporation, the vast majority of countries consider oil and minerals as a strategic resource. Therefore, the contracts of those resources are secret. Communities wake up in the morning and just realize that the multinational corporation from a country they never heard before has the license to open an open pit mine inside their territory. And they didn't even know until the day before. And there is an agreement between the government, the central government, sometimes the regional power, and this corporation, which is done in completely secrecy. Now, this is the perfect recipe for corruption. In some countries, we arrive at a level in which royalties are secretly negotiated. In Peru, if I am a mining company, I go to Peru and I ask for a license of extracting, let's say, digging gold up in the Andes. Gold is considered a strategic element, so I negotiate privately with the government and they give me the concession and we privately agree on how much royalties I have to pay. So it's obviously, to me, it's much easier to corrupt the government to have a 10% less of royalties. On the long term, I will save tons of money. So what we think is a key to break this cycle is to give communities the power to control their territories and to hold companies accountable. And we do that with something which is nowadays very popular, which is science. So originally we are a bunch of scientists, And we provide communities with scientific tools to take evidences, control their territories, and being able to stand up for their rights and hold companies accountable. And so basically, the communities will have all the scientific and technical and legal tool to even sue the company at international level if that is needed in order to get their rights respected.
Thank you, Flaviano. Thank you so much for your experience. And this is what you do with Source International. So I really invite everyone to look up your work. Maybe Michela can also paste it in the chat. So to continue and follow up on what you just shared about empowering communities and citizens, to me, it's really natural now to pass the word to Federico Angele from The Good Lobby. So Federico, my question to you would be, what is the responsibility of citizens? What can people do? You are the director of The Good Lobby in Italy, a fellows organization, which in Italy actually merged with your previous organization called Riparte il Futuro, the future restarts would be the translation, with which you did a really important work of creating a European coalition of organizations to advocate for strong whistleblowing systems, both for companies and public institutions in Europe. So from this experience, how do you really manage to engage citizens, and can citizen engagement really be a strong antidote for corruption and for more open and transparent institutions and governments? Federico.
Julia, thank you very much for your question and for inviting me. I mean, we both come from Italy, which is a wonderful country and where it's nice to live, where I chose to stay and reside despite the opportunities I could have abroad. And despite the fact that many of my generation, of our generation, have chosen to build their careers abroad. Because Italy, while one of the most loved countries in the world, a member of the G7 and G20, struggles to solve long-standing structural problems that make the economy more fragile, especially the one of the southern regions, that drive away foreign investments and that slow down private initiative and undermine trust in institutions. Of course, I'm referring to the strong presence of organized crime and corruption. If in recent years, Italy has climbed the rankings in the corruption indices, this is also thanks to the introduction of anti-corruption legislation that governments and parliament have put in place, thanks above all to the pressure from civil society that Julia was mentioning before. As activists, with the help of hundreds of thousands of citizens, we have managed to obtain a law on the electoral exchange between politicians and the mafias, a law on environmental crimes, a law that protects whistleblowers, and even a European directive together with, a great number of European civil society organizations. And let me also mention the Freedom of Information Act. All important steps forward, which will certainly contribute to improving the life of my country. But to have a more profound effect, to address that sense of mistrust and resignation that are nourished by the pervasive presence of corruption that makes bureaucracy inefficient and slow, that does not reward merit and skills, that even in the period of the pandemic has distorted important resources to be used in the healthcare. Well, to change all this is really important that citizens are an active part of the change. It is essential that they participate in political and civil life, that they monitor the work of the government and the public administration. For this reason, after years as activists with a campaign called Riparte il Futuro, dedicated to fighting corruption, we decided to bring the good lobby to Italy to replicate the success it had in Brussels and in Europe, and to apply its methods to a country where trust in institutions every year collapses and worsens. If corruption feeds the sense of powerlessness and detachment from institutions, the good lobby wants to provide citizens with tools so that they no longer feel powerless, so they may be able to make their voices heard. We do not call ourselves the good lobby because we think that lobbying is a source of corruption and lobbies are bad. Precisely because we believe that lobbying is a powerful tool for participation, because it allows civil society to let decision makers know their point of view and helps them to make more informed choices. We think that today, too often, access to power is guaranteed to a few actors, to those who carry out private interest, but not collective interest. For this reason, the good lobby wants to give tools, skills, and a voice to the general interest that too often does not get heard in places of power. For us, let me mention the last campaign, the last project we are incubating. The general interest has the face of a group of young people that we are helping right now, who are fighting to see the right to vote recognized, even when they are outside their voting municipality in Italy. There are millions of people, students and young workers, who have left their places of residence to move to larger cities and they cannot vote remotely. They are forced to incur large expenses, long and during this time, even risky journeys in order to express a fundamental right. The good lobby helps causes that can improve the life of each of us, helps citizens who want to contribute to social change to have the right skills to interact with decision makers, helps them to reach an audience, connecting them with many other citizens like them who want to improve society or to monitor the functioning of institutions and the choices of politicians. Our society is full of people, like I guarantee, who have good ideas and on how to improve our communities, but who too often are not heard, who do not know how to make themselves heard. And it is full of people who have skills and knowledge and are eager to help good causes. In a few months, the Good Lobby, the new established Good Lobby Italy has collected the availability of over 350 people, journalists, lobbyists, lawyers, managers, to use their skills for good grassroots ideas. This is how corruption is fought, recreating social networks, sharing skills to achieve political and social changes for the benefit of all, and by counterbalancing the power that the most powerful and consolidated private lobbies have in making themselves heard by decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Federico. I really love how the Good Lobby is really making their mission to make everyone a change maker. Like Ashoka says, that you really give them, you found your own way to do that by really giving them tools to be heard in the decisions and really make sure that they have access to decision making as well. I love it. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I would like to move now to the other side of the world compared to Federico. And pass the word to Greta, our amazing Ashoka Fellow from Mexico. You're also working on citizens engagement, Greta, and previously you focused in particular on youth engagement. So what is your view and what are your lessons learned on this? And again, what can we do as citizens? Do we all need to be really activist to avoid corrupted systems, or is it more integrated in our everyday behaviors?
Thank you, Julia. First of all, I want to thank Ashoka for the invite, for being on this amazing panel. I feel really, really humbled and really honored to be speaking next to all of you guys. So Mexico. In Mexico, 1 in every 3 people is young. which is something that in Olin we see as an opportunity, but sometimes it is a liability for our country, because that means that we should be investing in education, and we should be somehow making sure that young people in Mexico are being heard, and that they're getting the education and all the resources that they need in order to make this country a better place. So when it comes to corruption, Mexico and Italy share a lot of things. So we see corruption everywhere. I mean, it's part of the normal things that you do in the day, and it's something that we as Mexicans hate, but still we contribute to it every day. So one of the things that we talked about in this anti-corruption group is that in Mexico, corruption happens when someone else does it, but when you do it, it's not corruption. And that's something that we wanted to make sure that people understood, that even small actions and even everyday things that happen in your house or in the street being done by you are corruption acts. And one of our main groups, our main focus groups, as Julia said, is youth, because I mean, being a country with a huge youth population, we really need to invest in making sure that young people are being heard and that young people are being included in creating solutions for the problems in our community. So one program that we did was a special training for young kids in school who were aged 10 to 15 years old. And we were working with them in something that is called participatory budgeting. In Mexico, PB means that we citizens get to propose and get to vote on how to use 4% of our public budget in Mexico City, which is a lot of money. It's about $50 million. And the problem with this is that it's not very well known by the population. So a lot of bad guys, a lot of corrupt guys, and a lot of people who are advantageous are using this money to their benefit. So it's a big problem, but it has a very, very easy solution. So we need to make sure that citizens find about this mechanism and make it theirs. And one of the super things that this mechanism has is that young people, I mean, everyone, regardless of their age, they can propose projects. Children cannot vote. You can vote starting at 18 years old, but you can propose. So we started a program in schools to get children involved in using participatory budgeting to solve problems in their communities. So we had super creative ideas and super amazing workshops with the kids who had these very innovative ideas on how to tackle insecurity, or how to make sure that everyone in their neighborhood was getting meals every day, or how to make sure that people did not smoke in public spaces. And then at the end of the program, we told them that it could come true. And we got amazing results. Like the children said that they felt for the first time in their lives that they were being involved in community solving, in community problem solving. And the amazing thing about this, and the thing that we aim for, is for these kids to remain engaged until they can vote. So we're sure that when they come to be 18 years old, they will never be disengaged again. So it's a long shot, and it's a complicated route that we have. But I think that making this change in their attitude from not being heard and not feeling important to having them understand that they are a fundamental part of society, and that they can change the things that they don't like, is a way to keep them engaged, and in that sense to keep corruption away from them. And I'm going to stop here because my 5 minutes are gone, and I want to hear everything Paul has to say. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Greta. And yeah, I loved especially the final bit you say. It really resonates coming from Italy and now living in southern Italy, how engaging young people is also, it protects them from not being engaged by the criminals, right? Because they are very easy prey for criminals, especially in some areas of our cities. Thank you for the work you do and for sharing it. And please, if you have any questions also for Greta specifically, share them in the chat. So Paul, I'm so excited to have you here. You are an investigative journalist. You founded the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project in Romania. And one of the many lessons I gained from your work is the intersectionality of organized crime. Criminals work cross countries, cross sectors, and to go back to what Andrea mentioned at the very beginning, they are more cross, they collaborate much more, especially cross countries, than law enforcement does. So sometimes law enforcement falls behind, like the collaboration between countries falls behind the collaboration between criminals. They are innovative in a way, in a very scary way. We have also discussed previously in our conversations, Paul, that even the current emergency, like the COVID-19 one, has created fertile ground for criminals to become even stronger. So, Paul, you once said that information is our currency. So please tell us more, inform us. What should we all be listening to today? And we should really understand and know today about why it is so urgent that we all act now.
Thank you very much, Julia. And I think, first of all, I mean, the audience should recognize, the courage of, people like Greta, like Flavian, like Andrea, like Federico, because this is, I mean, this sounds like, sometimes simple work and, people who are dedicated to this, but this is also very, very dangerous work, And I'm saying this because, I work and I co-founded the largest investigative reporting organization, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, working on, crime and corruption worldwide. We're a global organization. And, I kind of have, both bad news and good news. So, but, there's less bad news than, good news. So I'll start with this bad news. And the bad news is that, corruption and organized crime, and especially international organized crime groups, they created infrastructure, they created their networks, starting 50, 60 years ago. So we are a bit late at the table, at the game, because we're only for the past, let's say 10, 15 years, try to form coalitions, to stop organized crime from doing business as usual, and kind of cross-sectorial alliances to work on this issue. And I think this meeting itself is a great step, towards something meaningful. But I mean, they do have, so they entrenched themselves quite a bit in the societies, all over the world, and what we do have, for the past 30 years, or in some cases, 20 years, since the fall of the communism, is, it's like you have this intersection between kleptocracy and organized crime that came together in a very big way, in the sense that in every, I mean, really in every former communist country, you have this, a few people who control a lot, large chunks of the economy. These are usually politicians, they are what we call kleptocrats. But these kleptocrats, in order to go about their theft, in order to, launder their money, they're using instruments provided by the West. So their money is welcome in the Western banking system because the Western banking system is stable, and these people don't want to keep their money where they stole them from in the first place. If you talk about kleptocrats from Africa, is the same. If you look at South America, Mexico, everywhere, is the same. The West is welcoming these people, unfortunately, and is both on the level of the cultural life where they're accepted, because they're big philanthropists, and they're big show-offs and all that kind of stuff. But really, what's important to understand is that a handful of people are actually damaging, a lot of countries. I mean, you don't have that many kleptocrats around the world, that work with organized crime at that level, and that are able to influence destinies of countries. But they have such power because, corruption is cheap. I mean, if we look, and we've investigated what we call the laundromats. These are large, illicit money flows, mostly from Eastern Europe towards the West. And you see that, you see billions and billions, hundreds of billions sometimes, of dollars or euros going from Russia, for instance, to Germany, let's say. But then you see that a very, very small bit of that money, like up to a few million, is used to pay up politicians, including politicians in the Bundestag, So corruption is very cheap. So this plays really well for the criminals, for the kleptocrats, But now, and also what's important with these guys is that democracy doesn't work in their favor. These are some of the biggest opponents of democracy. They're actually trying to fuel, these movements against, opening up borders, against, being global, when it comes to the economy, when it comes to social movements and all that, because this plays to their advantage. While they are, the main globalists of the world. These are jet setters, these are people traveling everywhere. These are people exchanging ideas across borders. They organize, criminal alliances. They are criminal angel investors. They put a lot of money into their crimes and so on and so on. And now the good news is that while these networks, were built over a long period of time, they were built mostly on mistrust. These people don't trust each other because they're all thieves. So this is where we need to act. When we build our alliances, between sectors, for instance, OCCRP, my organization, we built an alliance a few years back with Transparency International. It's called the Global Anti-Corruption Consortium. In simple terms, what this does is the following. At OCCRP, we identify, we expose high-level organized crime and corruption, and Transparency International takes our findings and transforms them into advocacy, which is great because it increases the impact of investigative reporting many folds. This is this cross sectors kind of initiative, are really, really important to deter criminals from doing business as usual. So we do have to come together, in order to fight organized crime and corruption, because law enforcement won't. Law enforcement agencies are confined to borders. They're trying, but lots of times they won't be able to. So just as a few final words on this. Just imagine, a system, that's completely doable, where you match the names of all the PEPs in the world, all the politically exposed persons, against property databases worldwide, and against banking records worldwide, so that you can identify when they hide behind offshores with their property. And I tell you, this will change the world overnight. If such a system will be implemented, this will completely change the world. Because guess what? I mean, out of those hundreds and trillions of dollars flowing through illicit networks, where do you think that money ends up? It's the law of gravity. It ends up being invested into land, and this is where, so of course they're bribing, with small money, the politicians, they're buying the occasional luxury cars or the occasional yacht and all that. But ultimately what they cherish is to own the earth, to buy the land, and this is, there's so many ideas that we can come, with, if we act, in alliances across sectors, across, continents and everything. Because again, it takes a network to fight a network, isn't it?
Thank you, Paul. It really does, and this will be a great insight for our second part of the session when we really talk about this. But before getting into that, I wanted to pass the word to my colleague Michela to see if there are a couple of questions from the audience.
Thank you, Julia. And yes, there are actually some great questions. And I'm going to start with a question from John Christensen from the Tax Justice Network, who actually also had a session yesterday. So John, we're really glad you're here because we see so much synergy between what you shared and what's been shared today. So the question is directed initially to Federico, but we can open it up. He told you, Federico, thank you, first of all, for sharing how lobbying is corrupting politics. And he said, what do you think can be done to reform political party funding to reduce the influence of wealthy and powerful players? Which is the big question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the, shall I reply immediately or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a very big question. What I could say is, first of all, I'm not sure that it's a good idea to have political parties just funded by private entities. Italy quite recently, I mean in 2014, decided to take a decision which is far from the one taken by other countries to change, to reform the system, and by allowing just private actors in funding political parties. When you decide to move in this direction, you also have to highlight, to stress the relevance of transparency, which on the one hand is to have a law on decision-making process, a lobbying law. So you have to understand how decisions are taken, who influence these decisions, who are the actors met by decision makers. But on the other hand, you really have to better understand who is funding your political parties, probably by, I would say, by adding limits, a threshold. You can't say that you can give, any amount of money to this, to a political party. You have to understand that funding politics is not just funding political parties, is funding political foundations, is funding candidates, which means that you really have to, I would say, to tackle this issue from a very broad perspective, not just focusing on political parties, but you have to consider all what is around politics.
Thank you so much, Federico, for bringing in that perspective. And we have one more question if there's time. Ju, shall I go ahead?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. All right. So there's one more question, which is asking, compared to the last 10 years, how do you feel we have been making progress in the fight against corruption? And I don't know if there's anyone who wants to take the question. Or maybe we can share. Okay, Paul, go ahead.
I can maybe give some answer to this, but I think, compared to 10 years ago, we've made huge progress. And we're seeing more unrest, and we're seeing kleptocrats and organized crime fighting back hard. And this is because we managed to expose them a bit more. So I think, there's also, in terms of alliances, across sectors, there are many initiatives going on. And that's also huge progress. I also think we're not near doing enough, because what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. We need, a lot more action, a lot more of these efforts that are here in this chat room, to be combined a bit, to exchange ideas. Because I think, we can. Look, next year is going to be 50 years since the start of the war on drugs, and drugs are a big fuel of corruption around the world, and it's a completely failed war, So there's a need of rethinking of this field, and I think the people in this room and the participants in this talk are right, on a right path, to going somewhere where we're a bit more efficient. If we're a bit more efficient, it's going to improve the world.
May I jump in and add something? And I think I agree with Paul. We have done definitely some progress in exposing corruption, but in some sector we haven't done so much, and we haven't gone so far. And he mentioned the drug sector, and I would add the money laundering sector. All this corruption money ended up in huge money laundering that in the recent years has become more and more sophisticated. towards fiscal paradise, towards land. I love what you said before. By land, at the end, it goes there. And land grabbing is a huge issue every day more. And also, if you think about drug, there is a thing that is pretty impressive. If you see a map on mining concession and the action of drug cartels in Mexico, and you overlap those two maps, they coincide perfectly. Where you have more drug trafficking and drug cartels activities is exactly where you have more mining concession, because those cartels made billions of money and they had to recycle somehow. So buy land, build a mine, and you recycle easily tons of money. So, and as I said before, because those negotiations are done privately, it's cheap. Corruption is super cheap. It's way cheaper than pay royalties. And that's, in that sector, I would say, we haven't done enough, to be honest.
May I add something from Germany as well? So thank you. I also agree that we have made big progress. So for example, in Germany, as I said, the law about money laundering improved over the last 3 years. But as I said, now you have to register a transaction in cash if you buy a house, but you don't have if you buy a company. And this is still a big problem, because buying a company with dirty money is not, let's say, it's under the radar. You don't see this, and this affects all of us, because if you buy a company or if you create a company just to wash money, then you don't have to be profitable. You just can offer dumping prices, make unfair competition to other normal companies, because you don't have to be profitable. You just have to wash the money. So you just need this as a washing machine to launder your dirty money, and this is affecting all of us. It's unfair competition. It's undermining our democracies and also our economies.
May I add something to that? So I agree with everyone, but I also think that in comparison with the last 10 years, technology is on our side. And globalization is on our side. So now it's easier to track down those transactions. It's almost possible to have them in real time. So corruption is becoming a little bit more complicated every day, thanks to our work, thanks to whistleblowers, thanks to all the networks that we have. And that is something that of course, corrupt people have to fight against, and that is something, I don't know, for example, Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies are a way to keep them checked. Of course, they also give them some other options. But my point is that our work these days, as it is coordinated and as it is aided by technology, is reaching. It's reaching farther, and it's making their job more complicated. So I think we are on the right track. Of course, it's a giant that we're fighting against, and it's not an easy task, but I think we're doing a good job.
Thank you, everyone. Yes.
I'll be very quick. I'm always the one bringing bad news. I'm sorry about that. Put in the wrong aspect. Yeah, globalization helped us, but globalization also helped a lot money laundering companies. There is one single building in the Cayman, one building that has the office of 5,000 companies, which that was spotted by Obama, which is great sense of humor, said there is a problem in our satellite because we haven't discovered the biggest building in the world. But I mean, and this problem of fiscal paradise, which one of them is just over the border here in Switzerland, just to not go so far. It's a huge problem. And nowadays, basically every corporation in the world has one or few offices in one of those countries, and it's super hard to track them. And I can tell you from experience, it's super hard when they get into those countries.
So my question comes natural, so because we are getting closer, building on everything that you said, what can we do collaboratively, collectively, cross-sector, cross-nationally, putting together everything that you said, what are the opportunities for collective action here? What is the first thing that you think we should start from? Maybe let's not begin with Flaviano, who will say it's impossible. No, I'm joking. But yeah, what do you see as the one collective action opportunity?
I would go for information sharing. That I think that's a big way of tackling this problem, and that is something that these corrupt people cannot mess with. If we have a very strong network of information gathering and information sharing that is available to the public, that is a great service to the world, and it's really hard for them to somehow temper with it or to bring it down. So I would totally go for information sharing and information being made public in real time or as close to real time as possible.
Yes, Paul, I was thinking of you.
Actually, just to follow on Greta's words, yeah, I think information sharing is crucial, and I think kind of extreme transparency is crucial. We need a lot more transparency with the institutions, a lot more transparency when it comes to taxes. Maybe implement a model like in Sweden where taxes are public. And not only Sweden, but the idea is, again, that we do have to share information, but we have to keep in mind the fact that, crime is a commodity for these people, for organized crime groups and for kleptocrats. They're doing the same all over the world. If a criminal model is functional, they will apply it over and over again. There's an import-export of crime. So sharing information, but sharing patterns that come from our work, from our experiences, is really valuable, So if on that information we can build a pattern recognition system to see, hey, this organized crime group that just started in Eastern Europe, just set up shop in Mexico, and then they also created a company in Ghana, in Africa, and one somewhere in Peru, and so on and so on. We can actually track down corruption across borders and somehow try to be pre-crime, try to warn people, this is an investment done by organized crime. This is real estate bought. This hotel belongs to organized crime and such. So we do need to share, patterns. We do need to share information, but all this is meaningless if we don't have, the cooperation of governments, the cooperation of the banking sector as well, because that's where the big money flows. I mean, yes, there's money in banks, but that's little money compared to what flows through the banks, And that's where we need to step up. And banks, and I heard from Belgium 2 days ago that banks there are going to share their SARs between them, which is great, because private banks don't usually cooperate with each other, but they will try to exchange this type of patterns between them. So that's a great step.
Julia, may I jump in? Because I completely agree with Greta and Paul, but I would also say that what is important is that we give to citizens the right tools in terms of being able to understand the information we can share together and how to be able to make advantage of the transparency and the, I would say, digital tools that we can use all together. Otherwise, these tools are pretty useless, and we will be, addressed by decision makers, by governments. You asked us for these tools, but no one is using us. This is why it is important to train citizens to, I would say, to make citizens more conscious of how these tools can really make the difference.
May I say something? So, yeah, thank you very much. Very good ideas, all of them. As Paul said, I think it's very important to create international networks like ours to work together and exchange information. So I think it would be great if Ashoka, who is the organization who is able to bring different stakeholders from different sectors on one table, would be great if Ashoka could somehow coordinate this global network against corruption and organized crime over the world, and get really, all these players to exchange information, because as Paul said, organized crime and corruption networks are organized cross-border, and we are not. So we need desperately an organization who is supporting us in doing so.
Thank you.
And now it's me giving the last. I'm joking.
No, go ahead.
I think they already listed everything, and yeah, as Andrea said, it's a global issue, so we have to tackle it globally. That's maybe the only thing I can add.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, we took really great notes of all this, and thank you, Andrea, for mentioning also the role that the Ashoka Network could play in this. And I would actually like to invite the audience to follow up with the question that my colleague Michela wrote in the chat. Also, not now, in the next few minutes, you can do so. If you have your personal motivation to contribute to such a collective impact initiative that we could lead together, please mention it in the chat. Michela is also going to share with you our contact details, because that is really the plan. The plan is really to build collective impact initiatives, putting all of these fellows and stakeholders together and really tackle the issue globally and cross-sectorally, as all of you shared. I really want to thank so much the speakers today. It was a very, very passionate contribution. We learned, I'm sure everyone learned a lot. Before we all head off to the next sessions, I just wanted to quickly reflect on how everything that we heard today connects a bit with this summit and why we're talking about this today. So there is really more and more global demand for social innovations, for systemic change, especially in issues so systemic like corruption and organized crime. And it's really important, and we heard it from all our speakers, to really empower others and go beyond our hero image of one social entrepreneur or one innovator doing everything, or the politician doing everything, but really every one of us acting as change makers in the field we care about. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. You can read the speakers' profiles if you scroll down this page. So thanks again, Flaviano Bianchini, Greta Rios, Paul Radu, Federico Angele, and Andrea Moriche. And thank you to my colleague, Michela Fenech, and thank you to all of you.